Hi, everyone, and welcome to Conversations on Sex, Addiction, and Relationships. I'm Dan Drake, and I'm joined with my colleagues and friends, Wendy Conquest, Jeannie Battoni, and Tim Stein. And today, welcome, guys. I'm really excited to talk about a difficult conversation topic, but it's something we haven't addressed on this podcast yet. And it's the impact of family and children after sexual betrayal. So anyway, I'm just curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this topic and what you think about addressing this today.
I'm
I
looking
think it's,
I'm looking
go ahead,
forward to
Tim.
this topic, the impact on kids and how to appropriately share information about sex addiction and betrayal trauma with kids is something that's uh, been on my radar for a while, partly because of my own, personal experience in recovery and disclosing it to my kids when it was appropriate, but just because I think it's a very um, underaddressed issue. It's starting to come to light a little bit with adult children of sex addicts, but as far as how do we best help kids who are still in the house with this, I think it's a really important topic that has not been addressed. I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, I'm also really happy that we're talking about this. So, so I think there might be, and I'm really curious to talk to Casey about this because I wonder her perspective on stages. So when sex addiction is first found out in the home, a lot of times the partner wants to tell the kids immediately. And of course, there's a great concern for the kiddos and are they safe and what needs to be done. But I think that I'm convinced that the kiddos know that something's awry anyway, and on an unconscious level at the very least. And so how to validate, hey, something's off within our family system. And this is usually their dad or their mom that is struggling. And then, of course, the partner that's struggling as well. So how to best help them understand what's going on and then relieve any kind of responsibility or guilt that they may feel that maybe somehow they caused this in some way. Kids do that a lot. So I'm looking forward to this topic.
Yeah, I'm looking.
How about you? Yeah.
Thanks. It's such a tender subject. It's, we've got kid development going on. We've got trauma in the home. We've got addiction in the home. And so, people are looking for guidance and suggestions of how to manage, how to say maybe something or nothing or too much, and that continuum. And so it's very nuanced. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. I also know it's not the only time we're going to have this conversation because it's such a big topic. So I'm curious what Casey has to say, and I believe she wrote a book on this too. So I'm curious to talk about the book as well. Time for Casey to come on, or Dan?
Yeah, so we're just want to introduce, so Casey Allison is going to be joining us, and she is a certified partner coach through AppSats. And we're so grateful to have you because, like they said, that there's so few resources for, there's resources for family, but I don't think I've seen a direct children's book for children. So that's something that I know she wrote, and she's created some resources for the families impacted. So Casey, come join us.
Come on down.
Hi,
Casey.
everyone.
Hey, it's magic.
Welcome, Casey.
You
Can
know,
you tell us?
I'm sorry,
So,
Dan.
go ahead, Jeannie.
I was just thinking, I just put it like clicked in my brain of children's book for children about either betrayal or disclosure. We'll get into that, but not necessarily it's written for the child. And that is the uniqueness of what Casey has created. So that's what popped in my head.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear your a little bit more about, your focusing in this area, Casey, and how, share with us what got you started in this area and interested in focusing in that area.
Okay. Well, I am a mom of 9 children, and my Betrayal has lasted over a period of several decades. And so I have watched my children go through various stages of understanding what's going on. We've been in various stages of family disclosure, disclosing what's happened in age appropriate ways. And now I have children who are moving into the adult world. And it's been really their conversations with me that have struck me and really impacted the way I look at this topic. So I decided with their help to create an entire curriculum, really, but it's focused around this book for children. So with this book, this is a book that you would read with your child, right? And it's a very age appropriate, even for those younger ages, 5, 6, and 7, very gentle and tender. My wonderful mother did these beautiful watercolor illustrations for it. And it's something that's meant to be used in an ideal situation. So that's after the parents have stabilized, after the parents have gone through their own full disclosure and there's a recovery plan in place, right? So once there's some stability, this is when they can sit down and have this moment with their child and read this book all together. So that's the starting point of the curriculum.
I love the part where you said after their own therapeutic disclosure, which I think is a very important piece of for the listeners of pacing that, because the relationship partners need to have an understanding of what's happened. And the betrayed need to be able to process and make sense of that so that they've got their best selves forward and present when they go to tell or inform or share whatever they decide to share to the kids. So I really love the fact already that you highlighted that part of to do the adult work between the coupleship first before we go telling children and such.
Absolutely. And also within the curriculum, I've recommended doing at the very bare minimum, Dr. Piper Grant's workshop as well on family disclosure, just to get more education and more perspective. Because what I found doing several family disclosures is the more that I worked with professionals and the more perspective I had from people who had done this or who were working with clients who had done it, the better those family disclosures went. And if we're going to do this, it's worth doing as well and as supported as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it brings up something for me that I hear from couples. I mean, it's so hard to go through betrayal anyway for couples. Obviously, it's traumatic. It's really difficult. And I also hear sometimes parents want to think that their kids don't know or that they're not affected. So, I mean, you're obviously addressing this in a way that we're talking family disclosures on the table. We're addressing this, whether it was accidental or whether something we're talking about it in a planned, intentional, supportive, safe way. I guess I'm just curious, even just maybe backing up a step, how do we get, how do you talk to those parents that want to say, no, my kids don't know anything. We're trying to protect them by keeping this information from them. You know, this assumes a buy-in that we have family disclosure. So I'm just curious how you approach those couples, those families.
That's great. Again, when I talk to people about this curriculum and when I use it with my own clients, it's part of an ongoing supported conversation. So one of the mistakes I made as well was thinking that especially my littlest children weren't impacted. Well, now that my littlest children are old enough to be really sharing with me, I am incredibly surprised at how impacted they were and what stories they told themselves, right? With in this vacuum that that was created by the tension that they felt in our home without the explanation. Every single one of my children had a different story that they believed. And it was usually very, very self-deprecating, very, very harmful. It's one of those things you would hear when you're working with your clients. Oh, this is the belief that I brought into this situation that I'm now in, and it's causing it to be more traumatic. So usually what I like to do is talk with, I'm usually working with mothers, talking with the mother. What are some things that you told yourself in your childhood and how did that affect you now? How's that playing out now? this is something that your child is doing. What did your parents not know about, right? That you knew or that you believed? What stories did you tell yourself? And sometimes that self-reflection can really help us see what's going on with our own children.
I think it's interesting too when you have more than one kiddo in a family. You would think that the siblings would talk to each other, but that kind of doesn't happen. Can you talk to that?
That's a great thought. I have both. Some of my children, I would say, share so much with each other that they're getting a lot of perspective from that sibling instead of from me. But then I definitely would say the majority of my children hold hold these hurtful things close, and that causes more harm. So the whole focus of the curriculum that I've created is for families to create families that have intimacy, that are having conversations with each other. So there's the book, but then I created the workbook, and the workbook is meant to be a conversation starter between the parents and the child, because that ongoing conversation is so important. And hopefully someone down the road will make one for siblings talking to each other, especially what I see with my teens, right? They have started to have those conversations where I'm not present. And I think they need support for those kind of chats as well.
Well, speaking of that, you talk, I don't know the ages and the ranges of your kids, but I've had a real hard time. And quite honestly, when I have clients and they say, we have a ranges, let's say, over a decade plus range between the kids. How do you have these conversations? What's age appropriate? You can share some level with a young kid that when you have a teenager or a young adult, it's going to be, more information, they'll understand more. So that's a tough with the curriculum. I haven't got to review your curriculum yet. Do you address, I'm assuming you address that and how what's appropriate based on age stages. I think Wendy, you were curious about that too. What's the developmentally, and then kind of just, yeah, how do you approach those issues?
Yeah, yeah. So the children's book is for those really young ages. I started with the very young ages, because what I really have done in my parenting, and hopefully it's the right thing, we'll see, right? Um, is when I can start with something foundational, I can build with each stage. And so the workbook is tailored more towards 8 to 12-year-olds, but the goal would be to have that foundational conversation and open up those lines of communication. And then with each stage, and then with each unique child's needs, right? To build upon the foundation that I've created. So that's going to take some intuitiveness from the parent, and then also some education, which again, Dr. Grant touches on this a little bit. And then I touch on this when I'm doing my sessions with my clients about that age appropriateness and where to draw that line. But we have to balance, right, what they've been exposed to, what they've seen, what they know, also where they are in their age, and then how they are developing as individuals.
Let me pause for just a moment to remind everybody that you're listening to Conversations on Sex, Addiction, and Relationships. And we are having a really important conversation about disclosure to children.
Yeah, so I hear you saying that ideally that we're addressing the level of detail and the level of content to the children's maturity level. And so we're not giving them more than they can handle. They're probably never going to get like the full story because that level of detail is not helpful for them. But ideally, I also hear you saying that, the parents have gone through this work together. And I assume ideally the parents are having this disclosure with the children together.
Right, right. That was a real struggle for me as I created this curriculum, because it is tailored for the ideal situation. Again, the parents who have gotten all the support they need and who have, at least for the moment, are united in their desire to share this information with the child. In the children's book, it says dad is going and getting therapy, mom has her support group. Not exactly in those words, but so it is the ideal situation. So it's not going to suit everyone's circumstances.
This
What
is reminding me of So Jessica Edens is someone who's in the APSATS community who offers a training on working with families and kids. And I'm thinking about that developmental age part, you know, what you say at certain ages, the changes as they age and as they become able will, and then also that united front. You know, I don't know about you guys, but it's reminding me of when divorce was very unusual. And how do you tell the children about divorce? And the ideal recommendation, which is still true, is to do that together, to let the children know that we are working, here's what the plan is, we love you no matter what. So I feel like this is kind of emulating that as well. Would you agree with that? Am I on the right track here?
For sure. There is a little part in the book that says mom and dad may need to take a time out. So it does kind of open the door to have that conversation if that's how things go. But yes, again, it is shooting for that united front, that ideal situation of both parents supporting the child.
Casey, I'm just so curious. Like I so want to hear how the book introduces this subject. You know, because it's such a conundrum. Yeah, so people have difficulties. Well, how are we going to say this to our friends, or how are we going to say this to family members, right? And those are adults that we're talking about. But how to present, and I think, boy, now the recesses of my memories, I think maybe it was akin to alcoholism, but basically saying, you know, mommy has a disease, or, you know, daddy has a disease, and we're talking to special people to find out how he can get better. And so, you know, I so want to hear how you
How do you introduce it?
It's a really difficult topic.
Yes, and I will say, I don't know that I will ever be comfortable completely with the language that I use and the way I chose to approach it. And I know some people might be uncomfortable with how I chose to approach it. That definitely came up in the beta reader process. I'm not sure how that lands for me. So again, looking through the book and deciding if it's the best resource for you is going to be imperative for families. Is this a best fit for our values and how we look at what has happened? So I used the language of choice. Dad made some choices that broke trust with mom, and now he's told the complete truth. Again, not the exact language. He's told the full truth. I know my children needed to hear that about disclosure. Some of my a little bit older 8, 9, and 10-year-olds, when that was their first question. So he made some choices and it broke your trust. If he broke your trust, do you know what's real now? Do you know what's true? Right? So yes, mom and dad, now everyone has the full truth. And the choices that we're making now are to care for ourselves. We're making a choice to get support from others. We're making a choice to get therapy. And in fact, we want to support you in all that you're doing. So that's how the book sets up the relationship between parent and child. We're here to support you. Here are other people who are here to support you. And then the workbook is called I Can Help Me. You within yourself have resources that can help you process what you're doing. And I'm here to support you in helping yourself. If that makes sense.
Yeah, one thing I love, I was just rereading through the book, and I love how, I mean, you break down such complicated, difficult conversations that confound most of us into a really understandable, kind of simplified way. So mom and dad getting therapy, broken trust, betrayal on some level, trauma symptoms, what the betrayed partner may be going through, and what the kids may be hearing, as well as what things they're doing, the steps they're taking with coaching or therapy to get care and support. And then I love that too. And that it wasn't the kid's fault. And there's nothing, and we're here to support you. I mean, to do that in a few pages is pretty difficult. So, I mean, I know every word is important, and making it clearly understandable for little ones is difficult. So, it seems, I feel like that would be, I guess I'm just appreciating you doing it, because it feels like that would be so much harder than writing a book to adults on this. Maybe that's why this hasn't been done as easily, because it's hard to do.
It is hard to do. I think it's been nice being able to have so much input from my children and from my experience with my children. Everything in the book is an experience of one, at least one of my children. And I think that's what makes the book good, is that I didn't, come up with these things in my mind. This is the experience of children who went through it. And isn't that such an amazing thing, that such a redemption in a way? I know my older children feel that way, that their experience and how their experience is something that can help other children because other children experience it too.
One thing
Yeah.
I'm wondering about is,
Okay.
and this is a question for all of you. This is a question for all of you. What would be your thoughts, your response to, because I can imagine there's folks out there going, I don't want to tell my children this part. Like, mommy and daddy aren't getting along. I'm willing to go there. But being very concerned about saying addiction, even to the teenagers and such, of does that put information in their brain? Does that bring something to them that they now have to hold? That, a lot of parents have got concerned about bringing more information as they get older. What do you guys all think about that?
Well, so I don't know if Casey says sex addiction. So one of the things that I heard Dan say was talking about the partner's experience in the book, right? Because partners become very dysregulated and exhibit all kinds of behaviors that they normally don't. And how confusing is that for children? And what popped into my head is when I was 14, my mother was a very mild-mannered person. And then one night, my dad and I were in the living room and we're hearing this. And she's throwing plates against the wall. And, we both looked at each other and she's screaming and yelling. And well, she was going through menopause. But no one talked about menopause. No one said that word. No one talked about it. And so it wasn't until I was way into my adulthood that I made the connection and said, oh, that's what was going on. And so, boy, it would have been helpful if someone had said, hey, women go through this, and have some explanation for it. So I guess the first question is, do you say sex addiction? I don't know if you say sex addiction in the book.
Well, I'm
I
not
don't
looking
say
about the book because I know the book is tailored to little ones. I'm
Okay.
talking about more adolescents because and that's a developmental age where people are trying to figure out their own identity and who am I. And so I'm curious how all of you all
I
are
know,
responding.
I know one of the concerns that we've had in this field when it comes to disclosure to kids is not wanting to unintentionally create shame around sexuality for, adolescents who are becoming teenagers or teenagers who are maybe exploring their own sexuality in whatever way that's showing up for them. And so avoiding the topic of saying, hey, this is a sexual addiction so that it doesn't impact their sexuality. Now, I will say I don't know how accurate that is or how true that is. We don't really have a lot of research at this time on whether it is more helpful to name it as a sex addiction or if it is harmful to do that for adolescents and teenagers. But that has sort of been sort of the thought in the past. I will say, when it came to my kids, I held a boundary around what was going on. They knew that my wife and I were going through some challenges. They knew that I went to meetings and I framed those meetings as, I'm going to meet with a bunch of other men because we're trying to be the best men and husbands and fathers that we can be. And they helped me with that. And so that's how we phrased that. I had done a survey of other therapists who are in their own recovery at that time, and I was editing the paper, and my son was sitting next to me asking me about it, and we were talking. And in that conversation, it became obvious to me that my son suspected that I was in recovery. And so for me, that's flipped from holding a boundary around something that I didn't feel like my kids needed to have the details of, to keeping a secret from him about something that he suspected. And so my wife and I reached out, we got some help. We talked about it and we sat down and disclosed to my kids. But it was for us, it was when to us it was obvious that they suspected it, and now we were keeping a secret. And I felt that that was the moment when it was more harmful to not disclose than to continue to hold what I felt at the time was an appropriate boundary. I don't know that we did it the right way. You know, we do the best we can, even if you're therapists, but you know, that was the path that we walked.
I don't know about whether you say sex addiction or not, but I think we can carry shame regardless. So we don't talk about it, and then we're quickly flipping channels from something when anything sexual comes on in front. You know, that's going to have an impact on sexuality, whether we're talking about it or not. And I guess the thing I want to emphasize, it's not just we're going through things, because when betrayal, when there's discovery, oftentimes it's the catalyst from the addict at a low point to start, you know, improving, becoming, you know, the better version of themselves. And then the partner starts tanking emotionally because they're, you know, experiencing these incredible trauma symptoms. So what the kids may see is, I'm just using dad and mom, like mom, the betrayed partner, dad, in recovery. If dad's in recovery, he becomes the best version of himself, while mom is, you know, really traumatized and unavailable like she used to be. So I feel like we have to at least acknowledge that this happens, and it's not just going through something, because then I feel like then the kids are going to, it's easy to blame mom that, well, mom's less available now. So something, she may have done something, or, you know, there's something wrong with her. So I think that has to be acknowledged somehow. I try to acknowledge that somehow, whether we say sex addiction or not.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think whether we're naming it as an addiction or not, talking to the kids about, hey, there's something that has shifted in our family, or at the very least, mom and dad are going through some stuff. We're trying to figure it out and we're working on it.
And that dad hurt mom's heart or her feelings, or, you know, something that I think that there needs to be that responsibility taken, that there was a harm done. I think that's what my take.
Wendy?
Well, yeah, I'm
I'm
thinking
thinking
also,
older kids. I'm thinking older kids.
yeah, well, there's also this piece that's been coming up recently where I've had some past clients basically come back and say, I don't believe that I had a sex addiction or have a sex addiction. And so it's been some interesting conversations that I've been having, because when the behaviors are found out, and usually it's the betrayed partner that says, hey, you know, I'm looking online, I think you fit this profile, and there's this thing called sex addiction, and I think, you know, this fits. And a lot of times then the person will go, okay, you know, something's really wrong, I get something's wrong, let's figure out what's wrong. I think everyone on the podcast right now believes that sex addiction is a real thing, and that we feel confident treating it, but it's not in the DSM yet. It's not in the diagnostic manual for mental health yet. So, you know, so I like couching it the way that Casey's saying, is the dynamic of it versus putting a label on it.
Is there a nuance when it comes to disclosing to kids if the genders of the addict and partner are flipped, or is it pretty much the same? If it's the mom who's the addict and the father who's the betrayed, is there a nuance or something to be aware of that's different than if it's, you know, the male addict and a female partner?
I found working with women addicts that that the dynamics with the male partners are the same. The level of hurt, the level of trauma, all of it. I think the question you're asking, I think, Tim, is there a difference in disclosing to the children about it? Boy, in my experience, that doesn't seem to be where the focus goes.
Okay.
I'm thinking of similar clients where it's a female addict, male partner, and it's a similar conversation. It's just the other person did the hurting.
Do you see, Jeannie, that the male partner wants the kids to know what's going on? Or no?
I'm thinking it's a split.
Okay.
So, which leads me to say, I don't know that we have enough data,
Right.
right? And I don't think we don't have any research on this. This is getting into the nuances of the nuances, but wouldn't that be so helpful?
Mhm.
I was thinking that also, Casey, a question for you is, and if you haven't, I hope you do. With the book, I've heard a lot of dad betrayer language, mom betrayed, and I would so hope there's a book also to go with the flip scenario, so that in another book, it's mom who hurt his heart and dad's the betrayed, because there's such a lacking of resources for female addict, male betrayed. And then, of course, we've got our lesbian gay communities as well, but it'd be nice if there were different versions available.
One day, someday, with
Yeah.
9 kids and homeschooling and working, I
Yeah.
am low on time.
How do you do it? That's impressive.
It's it's a party and a circus every day.
So you do this work. Are there any pitfalls or that you see people often fall into when they're disclosing to kids, or are there ever, I mean, I assume that there's nuances as we're going along, but are there any things that you're like, oh, absolutely do not do this?
But absolutely do not do. I'm very careful since I'm new in this field, but also since every family is unique. I'm very careful to not speak in absolutes. Within my experience and that of my clients, what I do see is those rash disclosures, those quick disclosures, disclosures made when you don't have the individual support that you need and the stability that you need. And I'll tell on myself, that was our first family disclosure. I had just had it, and I spoke to my kids about that, and it was extremely detrimental to them. They all remember it except the one who was a baby at the time. And it can be done so much better. I look at this as this is just an incredible opportunity, right, for your family. It's an opportunity to demonstrate in a big way how to take ownership when you do wrong. That doing wrong is a human thing to do, right? To make a bad choice, to make a wrong choice that hurts someone is a human thing to do, right? We can humanize that, and then we can humanize and demonstrate to our children, how do you make a repair when you harm someone? How do you make a repair? It's just a wonderful opportunity to model a very human experience, which, Lord willing, is going to reduce shame, right? For the child and for the parents. And in that reducing of shame, we are creating cycles and systems within our family to avoid our children struggling with this, to give them the tools to manage. And that's what the workbook is all about. As y'all were speaking, all I could think about was just, this is one small tool that needs to be in an arsenal of tools, right? We're going to have all kinds of conversations about sexuality, hopefully, about making choices that have consequences, about the addiction and the system, the situation our family faced. So if we can build an arsenal of tools, we can really help our kids. The key is to have the conversations, to intentionally create space, to have ongoing conversations throughout our child's life. And that's the goal of this book, is if that's not already happening in your family, to help that to start.
Can you talk a little bit, and just as we're getting closer to wrapping up, I'd love to know more about the curriculum. I mean, without sharing, the teaser, like what could people expect with your curriculum?
All right. So the curriculum is built around the children's book. So you have this outside person, somebody who's gone through it, the child and the book. Okay. And the curriculum, what it does is the parents have their own workbook that helps them walk through the children's workbook with their child. And they first reflect on the child's experience. So we listen to how our children are perceiving what's going on in the book. Through each page, we are asking our child, what do you see here? So what feelings do you think this child is having? What ideas is he having? What what's another one? What do you think he's feeling in his body there? Right. So we first look at the child, kind of take a broad picture, and then we ask our own child, when we had our family disclosure, what were you feeling? What did you feel? Where did you feel it in your body? Right. So teaching the child to reflect on their experience and share it and process that in this safe and supported environment. One of my favorite parts of the curriculum is I took the 8 C's of internal family systems and I turned them into pets. And so the child gets to choose, what pet do you think the little boy in the story needed then, right? And why? And I really kidified the definitions of those 8 C's so that the children can really just express what they need, right? The idea is to create a vocabulary that we share as a family so that not only are we talking about it, when we speak to each other, we understand what each other means. So that's the whole curriculum, just a series of exercise to begin those conversations and to create safety without shame in those conversations.
You know, I can make up that there might be some addicts out there listening to this with a lot of fear of, if we do this, my kids are going to hate me, or if I tell them this and mom and and we don't stay together, my kids are going to reject me. And I just want to say, and I would love your perspective on this, Casey, that my experience is that's usually not the case. The relationship that kids have with the parent, whether the parent is a betrayed partner or the addict, is how that particular parent is showing up in their relationship with the child. And that really has much more of an influence on how things are going to turn out. But do you have thoughts or experience on kids' relationships with the betrayed parent or with the addicted parent moving forward after disclosure?
I have experiences with the clients that I've had, and then also my experience, which is what I used to tailor the book. I think I would say this: there is an inherent risk in talking about this topic with our kids. And the risk is it's going to hurt, right? When I gave space to my children to tell me how they feel, how they felt, some of the things they said were extremely painful. And I think that's going to go for either partner, right? For the addicted or for the partner. And that's why it is vitally important that I am living out my own recovery, that I have the support that I need, that I have someone to process this with. So, to the parents who think about doing this with their children, first check in with yourself. Do I have the support I need? Will I be able to handle it when my child says, Mom, you are so checked out, I felt you didn't care about me? Or Dad, how could you make that decision? How could you do that? Am I in a place where I can manage my emotions and get the support I need if it hurts? So, but but the wonderful benefit of having the conversation, right, is that we are creating true intimacy, and we know that that is the antidote for addiction. That is how we have wonderful mental health, is we have that connection. And so I would say creating that connection is not only going to begin the repair within the relationship, but also I would hope that it would lead to more intimacy than you had to begin with.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Seems like a good place to wrap up.
Yeah, I was going to ask you for a final word of hope or encouragement, but I think you just gave it.
I think she just
so
gave it.
beautiful. Casey, thank you so much. This is really, and we've said it before, but I really think, there are some people that have bravely walked into this area, but it's still a pretty underserved area. So thank you for taking your experience and really sharing that with us and the world. And I'm just so grateful for you to do that. We'll link to it, but can you share where people can find you and how they can find these resources?
Sure. My website is comeawakecoach.org. So that's where you can find everything.
Perfect. Casey, thank you for joining us. And thanks everybody for listening. You were listening to Conversations on Sex Addiction and Relationships, and we were talking about disclosure today. So we would love to hear from you. We do mailbag episodes. And I'm going to try and remember the don't remind me, Tim. I'm going to remember it this time. If you we'd love to hear from you. So if you have questions, feel free to email us at conversations.sar@gmail.com. Did I get it?
You got it. And
Okay,
if you're
great.
listening to us, like us on whatever platform you're listening to. It helps other people find us and join this conversation.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks to your kids, Casey.
Thank you. Thank you. I
Mhm.
will.